Welcome to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. Here's your hosts, Kyle Baker and Dieter Burrell.
Welcome back, guys, to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bags Podcast. I'm your host for today, Dieter Burrell. I got Kyle with me. And me and Kyle, we're just chatting it up over here. And I mentioned to him, I was listening to Joe Rogan on one of his YouTube pre-recorded podcasts, and there was an interesting quote he stated that kind of hit deep in me, and I think it probably hit deep in a lot of you guys. I think the quote reads, "Most men live lives in quiet desperation." Have you ever heard that one, Kyle?
I hadn't really until you mentioned it, so I ended up actually going and looking up where it came from, and it said that it came from Henry David Thoreau back in 1854. And it also, there's a little bit more to it. It says, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation." So I guess what he's saying there is, by resigning, you're confirming that desperation to get out of the situation that you're in.
I listened to that. I think you said it. You said it was written in 1854.
Yeah, 1854 is when Henry David Thoreau said it.
I mean, think about that. It's like if you take a moment and you think back on the time that it was written, history. You look back on things, and people that were dealing with this thought tends to repeat itself. And many of us have dealt with this quiet desperation where you kind of sort of resign yourself when you find yourself at a job that you're not happy. You wake up in the morning and you're dreading getting dressed.
Yeah.
To get to work. You want to get in the car, drive to work, and you don't want to start the car because you sit there. And the moment you get to the parking lot, you sit in the car another 5 minutes and you're going, do I really want to walk into that job?
Yeah.
I had feelings like that. I went through that.
Well, whenever you sent that link over to me from Joe Rogan's podcast, I kind of hit on that one piece in there. It says something to the effect of the highlight of some people's day is going to the bathroom to look at their phone. Right, and what a sad life that is, But I mean, I'm sure it's very true for a lot of people. Like, they hate going to work. Every morning they wake up dreading the job that they have to drive to. They sit in traffic. They go to their office, and the highlight of their day, the time that they feel most like themselves, is going to the bathroom and being on their phone. Yeah. Right? Like, that just seems like such a miserable existence, and I don't quite understand why we do that to ourselves.
I'll be honest with you. When I graduated back in 97 with my bachelor's, I went and worked down in Miami for about a year, and I felt overwhelmed. I think having left Miami and gone down to Gainesville and then come back after 2.5 years, I think, I was in Miami, and the work ethics in Miami were high, strong levels. I felt after being there for about a year that it was just too much for me. I had to decompress, I call it.
Yeah.
And then I went and worked over at Naples, Florida for about 9, almost 10 months for a small 5-person company. I realized I think I have a little too much of Miami in me. I can't stay in a town like this because it's like a lot of retirees. So I moved to Arizona. A lot of friends I had that moved out there for school. They said, come up, stay with us. We'll find a job. And I worked out there for a while, but I didn't find the right job.
Yeah.
And I just went through the motions.
Right.
And I found myself in a bit of a depression, realizing I spent all this time in school, got a degree, and now I'm in a career that's not what I thought it was going to be. I don't know if anybody out there that's listening to this podcast, if you felt that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever felt that way.
Sometimes. I mean, that definitely can happen. I mean, one of the things that I always find interesting is whenever you talk to people, you say, "Hey, how have you been?" Like most people's reaction is, "Oh, I've been busy," right? "Oh, yeah, work's good, but it's just busy and got a lot going on," and almost like as a badge of honor that they've got so much work that they got to do, right? And they want to make sure that they kind of feel important. And like you were saying down in Miami, like it was almost too much. Like their work ethic was so much further gone in that direction. And one of the things that my wife and we kind of always say to each other is that we work to live, we don't live to work, right? So that to us means like we go to work because we have to in order to live the lifestyle that we want to live. But life comes first before work. So if there's a life event going on, something as big as a baby being born to as little as a t-ball game, that comes first, right? And I think we've had podcasts about that previously, kind of like what balls you're juggling and making sure you're not dropping the wrong ones. And but I think that goes back to that quote of keeping yourself out of that desperation kind of mentality of, I'm always just fighting for the next thing at the office. I'm always fighting for the next project. I'm always working towards this. I'm not really focused on anything else outside of that workplace.
Right.
So I think that you can, it's weird because you if you enjoy your job, then that's okay. Like that mentality can kind of switch. But if you're that person that's dreading going to work every day, you've got to find something else that you find joy in. And then maybe one day what that is can turn into your job. I think in that YouTube video that you sent me, he was talking about like designing furniture and building furniture, and that's a very fulfilling thing and an enjoyable thing for some people. And if that's the thing that you find joy in, you need to spend as much time as you can trying to turn that into a way for you to make a living.
If you're passionate about something, even though you have a job, and I think Joe touches on a little bit on that, he says work at that every night that you come home, work at the stuff that you enjoy, and then plan your escape. He calls it escape, I think, or something similar to that.
Yeah.
Because that's what I kind of, the gist of it, that's what I kind of say. You keep working your 9-to-5 job, and at night, what you're passionate about, you work on it. Because that's what you're really passionate about. And as time goes by, you keep building up your escape. You plan it.
Yeah, because I don't think he's telling anybody, and we're not telling anybody to just like quit your job that you hate and go build furniture, right? But if that's something that you're passionate about, you have to put the time and the effort in to build that up, right. And then eventually you get to a point where you're like, okay, I think I can make this my living. And then you can get out of that. And that's that whole kind of planning your escape. You're not going to escape in a day,
right.
But you need to start today planning for how you're going to get out.
Yes.
If you're miserable, there's probably a lot of people that go to their office cubicle every day and they might be fine. They might really enjoy that, and I think that's kind of, it ties back into kind of what you did, right?
Right.
Like you kind of had this business for a little while and you kind of felt it out, and you didn't really do a lot of projects or anything like that, but you were kind of planning and thinking and positioning yourself to where one day you could get out and you could do your own thing.
Well, is something that's very important for everyone to listen to. I think fear is your biggest, handicap. Because people are more afraid of what they don't know, because they want to make sure that everything, they want to feel that comfort zone. And that's why people go to a job and say, hey, I want to get that paycheck every 2 weeks or every week. I want to make sure I get that paycheck. So I'm going to go work for somebody. And I think what people forget that they're doing is they're paying you for your time and knowledge, obviously. But someone is out to make money off for their benefit off of you. And when you start going on your own, you'll make your own rules, and your way of thinking changes. And this is what I was telling Kyle. It's like, I've been listening to these different podcasts, and it kind of hit even deeper into me now that I don't have anybody kind of telling me, you need to do these five or six tasks by the end of the week, and you're just trying to figure out a way to kind of make them work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kind of become overwhelmed at all these things that you have to do at your job, and you're just trying to get it done. And you don't have time to think outside the box, which is important. It's a deep thought because it kind of, you have to take a step back and look at what you're doing and where you're heading, and then say, it's like, I have goals. Like, your ultimate goal, in my opinion, and everybody may have a different opinion based on what you guys are dealing with. It's like, how do you improve your situation? I know in your case,
I need to get licensed.
You need to get licensed. So what's your literally your number one goal should be getting licensed.
Right.
Everything else should be secondary. But what ends up happening, and I'm not speaking for you, is like we end up kind of taking on the role. I say, well, I got like 10 other things I need to do. I got a basket full of like 100 things, but I got 10 things that I need to do first.
Yeah.
And then the one thing that I had prioritized, you know, for the past 6 years, I've had to push it down because I got like these short-term goals that I have to achieve. And
yeah, that is one of the things. Like, your short-term goals seem to always overtake your long-term goal. But if you're not always pushing towards that long-term goal, then you're never going to get that fulfillment of what you've really been wanting to try to do, right? Like, if I just live my life day to day and I'm not thinking about where I'm going to be in 5 years, then I'm really doing myself an injustice, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, you know, I need to get some of these tasks done, but sometimes instead of doing 10 tasks today, I need to just do 7 and then spend that time I was going to spend on the other 3 working towards my long-term goal. So, I mean, that can definitely be a tricky subject for some people because they have so much overwhelming work that needs to be done right now that they can't put some of that stuff aside and focus on that long-term goal. Like for me, like getting licensed. Life happens along the way, right? And I just constantly am taking on more and more things that are inevitably pushing me further and further away from that goal that needs to happen.
Here's a thing that triggered my thought when I heard Joe talking about that quote. You know, I'm gonna repeat it. Most men live lives in quiet desperation. It's sort of like at that point you're kind of sort of giving up, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't, because there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to look further than the work that you're tasked to do for the day or for that week.
Well, and the other part of that, like we're focusing a lot on that desperation part, right? But the first part of that says in quiet. I think the other thing about it is that you need to just speak up and tell people how you really feel. You know, I'm not saying go to your boss and say, hey, I really hate my job.
Right.
I'm not saying to do that, but, you know, talk to your friends, talk to your spouse, talk to your colleagues, let them know that, hey, this is kind of how I feel about this. Like, I don't know what I need to do in order to make myself not dread coming to work every day. You know, maybe there's another role at your office that you could fill that you would find more joy in. Maybe right now you're managing people and you really don't like it and you just hate coming into the office every day to manage people, but there might be another role in your office where that could go away and you could just be working more on the technical side of things. You know, but if you don't let anyone know and you're just quietly hating your life, hating your career, no one can help you fix that. And like finding a good leader that you can talk to and that they can help you with that is very beneficial.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that quote comes in 2 pieces, right? Like, one, you don't want to be in desperation in general, but you definitely don't want to be in quiet desperation and not telling anyone about the way that you feel.
Yeah, I think it's important to find somebody. And this is typical of our culture. And it has nothing to do with, you know, men culture, women culture, whether you're black, gray, whatever color you want to associate yourself with. But it's the typical, you're a guy, you don't tend to share your emotions with anybody, but it is okay to share your vision of like, hey, you know what? I've always wanted to learn how to play the guitar and sing. And I mean, that's a goal. It's okay. You can share that and say, hey, I never knew that about that. Yeah, I was an artist when I was in high school, or I did this when I was in high school, or middle school, and I stopped. I stopped because something happened. Something tragic happened. I had a buddy of mine in middle school that I think his mom died in a car accident because of a drunk driver. What path did he take? I don't know. I lost in touch with him. How did he deal with it? Like things that he wished that he would have done never came to be because of something that happened. And it's like, and I think maybe some of you guys out there have heard our previous podcast. I used to be, when I came out of high school, I went and worked at a car dealership for 2.5 years, and I was content. I was working, doing stuff, learning my trade. I was ASE certified, and it just one thing happened on my job that I literally told the bosses, take this job and shove it.
Yeah.
And I went home and I told my mom, I quit my job. And she goes, what are you going to do now? I think I'm just going to go back to college. And she goes, if you go back to college, she says, you can stay here at the house rent free. You just got to figure out the finances. So I went to get a loan, to get a student loan. And lo and behold, by then I was already 23, 24. And I could get like free money to go to school. And I never knew that. And I ended up getting the grants, and I applied every year as early as I could. And I'm sure that there's grants out there, and there's scholarships out there. Because you go through the system, they apply, and then they see your qualifications, and they put you automatically into certain categories that you apply for that. So when you feel you're desperate and you don't see something further ahead for you, sharing your thoughts and reaching out to people sometimes will help you more than one way.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. Well, Dieter, great episode. But before we go, as always, the joke of the day. What's the opposite of artificial intelligence? Natural stupidity.
Thanks for listening to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. Please subscribe on your favorite platform, and we will talk to you next time.